All right, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Miss Tara Teaspoon Bench. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for
Tara
having
is
me.
going to tell us about live life deliciously. And just in case anybody did not know, I am a huge fan. I have been cooking my way through the book, all the various tabs. Highly recommend it. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping tips real quick. Make sure if you're joining us now that you are on mute. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. And this will be recorded just in case anybody misses any parts. And I'm going to turn it over to Tara. And please don't forget to tell us how you got the nickname Teaspoon.
Oh, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for joining. I love these intimate conversations. So I am thrilled to be here with you. I'm coming to you. I'm normally in New York City. That's where I live. And I am staying with my family in Utah for the holidays. So I'm kind of bouncing all over, but happy to talk to you guys a bit in the middle. So I want to just tell you a little bit about my story, writing the cookbook. This is my first cookbook, and I've been in the food publishing industry for 20 years. So, and then yes, let me tell you about how I got the name Tara Teaspoon. So I am barely 5'2", so I'm short. And years ago, a friend of mine said, I'm going to call you Tara Teaspoon because you're not big enough to be a tablespoon. So that's where the name came from. And I didn't think much about it. She was just being funny and called me that for a while. And years later, when I started my business, I wrote a million names on a paper and that one stuck and seemed to work. So now I literally have children and kids and friends and everyone calls me Tara Teaspoon. So you can call me Tara Teaspoon. I am going to share my screen. I have some fun pictures, a little bit of a slideshow to show you while I tell you about my book. And I'm so flattered that Erica is a fan and has been cooking from it. That's truly what I love and my hope for this book. So let me share my screen and get that up for you. Pick the right one. All right, that should be that should be it. All right, some way, hang on, I've got to exit full screen. I went a little ahead. We want to go back. Now I know how to do that. Okay. So I told you a little bit about my name. I debuted this cookbook this fall in October, so it's brand new. It's still a baby. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I wrote it, what brought that on, and what I've learned in 20 years of being in media cooking, both in magazines and TV, and tell you a little bit about my cooking point of view. So to me, cookbooks are everyday useful. I think for everyone they are. They're an everyday useful tool. But I also think that cookbooks reflect a culture and an era. And as library fans and book fans, I'm sure you know that and feel the same way. And even though I live in a tiny New York City apartment, I am a major cookbook collector. So from vintage cookbooks from the early 1900s to, fondue cookbooks from the 70s and super classic standards like The Joy of Cooking and Mastering the Art of French Cooking. I love those. I've got all of those and more. And like many of you, I sometimes flip through these books with no intention of cooking, just to remind myself of another era, transport me to another culture, and allow me to be that culinary traveler to far off locales. And to have my own cookbook enter libraries and your homes is such a dream and an honor. So a little bit about why I wrote it. I consider myself a culinary educator first. I want to get the right tools into the hands of cooks. I want cooking to be a way to build traditions and make memories. And I want to show you how that's possible and how it's enjoyable. And I know many of you have been cooking your whole lives. So cooking is not new hat to you. And we often need those refreshers and sort of get out of the rut cooking experiences. But we also love memories. And I think memory is an important part of a culinary experience in our lives. My cookbook is peppered with first taste and food sensory memories. You know, when I think of my mom cooking, my memory goes right to a skillet of sauteing onions. And that smell and sound says dinner to me. It says family, it says home, it says comfort. And I know many of you have those memories. And I spent my childhood cooking with my mom and my grandmother's. Family get-togethers revolved around a beautifully prepared meal, even if it was just breakfast. And the whole wheat pancakes that you see on the bottom right of this screen, that recipe in my cookbook it's an enhanced version of my grandma's. I think it's only minus the much beloved to me sound of the blender whirring in my grandmother's kitchen as she cracked the wheat for these pancakes. And as a young adult, I moved to New York City and my culinary experience was vastly expanded. Just by having so many cultural food choices and flavor profiles, which were suddenly new to me and accessible to me. And I remember eating my first pork buns at a tiny Asian restaurant in Queens, New York. And it was a delicious, eye-opening experience. Having grown up in the West with very little authentic Asian food. With the recipes in my book, I want my readers to have those aha moments. The moments of, I didn't know I loved tater tot nachos, or I didn't know I loved chimichurri sauce. But I mean, backing up, I really don't think anyone doesn't love tater tot anything, right? So I probably the desire, the dream of every aspiring chef or cook was to work at Martha Stewart. At the time, I was going to culinary school, and my dream came true. In the late 90s, I became a food editor at Martha Stewart Living. And occasionally my cooking with her on TV shows, as you see in the photos, I was cooking right alongside her. And, Martha Stewart with her magazines, her cookbooks, her TV shows, I think they changed culinary history. I think they really had they played an important part in changing that. Before Martha, you either cooked gourmet food at home like Julia Child, or you were a home cook sticking to Americanized lasagna and quick and easy recipes from Good Housekeeping magazine. And I think Martha showed that home cooks could really up their game by learning the basics and presenting food beautifully and elegantly, and more importantly, deliciously. She was a huge influence on my culinary point of view. And, I took that with me through my career. Her influence really taught me how to teach basic skills through new takes on classics and learning luscious food styling. I'm a food stylist by trade. I learned how to make food for photography when I worked at magazines. And food styling is a trade. It's a skill that I had to learn. And now I am able to use that in my own recipes on my blog, Tara Teaspoon, and in my new cookbook. So I wanted my first cookbook to be an inspiration and a learning experience, and still be something that was everyday cooking friendly. And that's what I share on my blog. I started my blog several years ago after Ladies Home Journal magazine closed. I was the food director at Ladies Home Journal, and for many years loved that job and was sharing my recipes with millions of readers. That magazine had a reach of 12 million. And it was, I just loved the legacy of that magazine. It was 135 years old when it closed. And it had been around teaching women how to run their homes, how to cook, how to, live their lives in so many ways. And I just love that legacy. And I really wanted my blog to be accessible. And so carrying that over into my cookbook. I've got chapters in the book about the right equipment, equipment that I think simple basics that should be in every kitchen to make cooking easier. I talk about the new pantry staples. I think we think of our pantry as, I've got olive oil, I've got, salt, pepper, butter, sugar, whatever. But I think now so many new flavors are accessible to us, so many ingredients that have global inspiration. I think the new pantry consists of curry paste and chili sauce and sesame oil and different jams and spreads and different kinds of canned beans for that matter, and pastas and rice. And so I talk about that, and I loved incorporating all of those ingredients that are very accessible at the grocery store into meals that were super flavorful and fun in this book. So, I think this book is for people who are very experienced at cooking, maybe tired of making the same old dishes and they want to expand their horizons. And also a way to learn cooking. I wrote the recipes as if I was right there in the kitchen with you, so that you could follow along and feel like I can do this. Even though there's more than 10 ingredients, I can put these together in a really fantastic meal and be successful. So, let me go. Well, I don't know if I can go back to that slide. There we go. I just wanted to share some of these pictures of equipment. As you thumb through my cookbook, the chapter headings are pictures of kitchen tools that are my collections, things that I literally have in my apartment that I use. And I cherish these. They make cooking enjoyable. I love collecting these reamers and wooden spoons. And some of these wooden spoons are my grandmother's and my mother's. And now I get to use them in my kitchen. And so that was kind of special to incorporate into the book and make it a little bit personal. So I wrote this book, for all those reasons. And, as a way for people to use their creativity, to explore cooking and to share it. I really feel that food is a gathering tool. It's a connector. We gather people around food, and that's important to me. I love doing that. And this year's been hard. We haven't been able to gather around food, but I've certainly given a lot of food away. It's my little comfort gift to people. And I know when we start getting together again, and even in our small groups, food really brings us together, not only cooking it together, but eating. So let's see, I will stop sharing my screen and come back to you. But now that I've been talking your ear off, I would love to chat with you, or if you have questions, or tell me about the books you love, the cookbooks you love. Tell me what you love to make in your kitchens. And really, I would love to just chat with you tonight.
Oh, sweet. If anyone has any questions, feel free to enter in the chat here. Otherwise, I just have to share. So I've been cooking my way through Sarah's book because, yes, I have enjoyed it thoroughly. In fact, it was super great. There was Patsy's pepperoni pasta.
Yes.
Okay. So, yes, that was the first one that we made. And my son and I did it together because he's not a super big cook. But yes, so because he's a young adult, so he's working on learning. So that was, it was awesome. It was fun to do it with him. Yep. Fun to do it with him. And it was a lot easier than he thought it would be. So, which was really, really, really great. And then for my mom's birthday, I could go on and on. But for my mom's birthday, I made this cake, which I have to show you because I have to find it. And it didn't turn out quite as beautiful as this chocolate cake is in the book. But
oh, yes, my chocolate cake. I'm so glad you made that. It's towards the end in my dessert chapter. And while you're finding it, I will tell everyone the dessert chapter is my biggest chapter. I'm such a sweet tooth. There it is.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah.
It turned out fantastic. But I do have a question for you about that. So I did try using the cake mix, and I actually froze the cake after I made it to make it easier to work with.
Yes.
But it was still, what tips do you have for making a cake mix not quite so dry?
Ooh, well, let's see. I think this cake butter based? Let me look. I wish I had all my recipes memorized. So this cake had oil,
Yep.
oil in it, and that should help with the moistness. But with a thin cake like that, it really is, you don't want to overbake it.
Okay.
So I think that would probably be my two things is if you want a really moist cake, you use oil. And then, yeah, don't overbake it. But this one, it's one of those that I like eating pretty quickly after I assemble it because the outside is not iced.
No, and it's so pretty.
Thanks.
So there's a question here. Are there any Indian recipes in your book?
I saw that come in too, and I'm seriously flipping through here. I know I've got Thai and Vietnamese and Mexican and Moroccan and Italian. I don't know that I have a particularly Indian flavored dish. I love Indian food. So it's so funny that I don't have, I have a chutney and yogurt chicken dish. And I think that is definitely inspired by Indian flavors. So I marinate my chicken in yogurt, and then I've made a chickpea and chutney dressing to drizzle over it. And it's got mangoes with it. And you can make it inside in the broiler or on the grill in the summer. And that's probably the closest I've got to a really Indian dish.
Yeah, I have done the, I'm looking for it now. I'm flipping the, not the chicken mango kebabs, but the Thai chicken meatballs and the yogurt marinated grilled chicken. But I did do it in the oven. Yep.
Oh, good. Good. So yes, one of my favorite recipes is that curry. And she asked, is there any dal or curry? And no Indian curries, but I do have a couple of Thai curry recipes. And this one is vegetarian. It's a vegetable curry, sort of an inspiration with from masman curry with a little bit of the peanut in it. And then let's see, that other one is, this curry recipe was a standout. I was surprised at how popular it's been since the book came out. And I don't know, I mean, my photographer did a bang up job shooting this recipe, but it's a Thai, golden Thai curry, and everybody's loved it. So I love cooking with global flavors. Let's see, Erica, should I just kind of pop in with those questions?
Was working for Martha Stewart stressful?
Yes. And funny enough, I started there when I was young, 22, right out of school. And I didn't know anything else. It was my first job out of school. And it was so stressful, but I didn't know there was anything different than really stressful work. I was working alongside some of the most talented people in their fields, the craft editors, the garden editors, the art directors, the photographers. Everyone at that magazine was just so uber talented, but they didn't know how to manage or run a business. So it was also very political because this business was trying to run and it was growing exponentially every year. I started at Martha Stewart before her company even went public. And so I just saw this massive growth. And I think the stress came with that growth. And it was so fast and everyone was just working so furiously to put out such amazing magazines and books. But, by the time I left, it was time to leave and I was able to take a little breather. But it was a great experience. I learned everything about food publishing there and I loved it.
Nice. So what is your favorite recipe in the book?
Oh, it's so hard. Every day I would pick a different favorite. I definitely have a handful. One of those curries, and it will take me a minute maybe to flip through and I'll show you some. This one, just because it just makes my mouth water. And I made it, I created it. It's my smoky mac and cheese, and it's got smoky Gouda in it and caramelized onions. And it just is really one of my favorites to eat. Some of my favorites to share, I think these cornmeal waffles in the breakfast chapter. They are cornmeal waffles with a brown butter pecan syrup on top. And they're so fun and different. I love sharing them with people. Let's see, some of my other favorites. I have a chicken pozole soup that I've made a million times, and I love sharing it with people. One of my easy favorites, I think, and it's easy enough to make on a Wednesday night, is my chicken in paper. And if any of you have cooked en papillote, which means in paper, it basically steams whatever you put in this little parchment packet. And it's a little bit of sweet and savory. I put some golden raisins and pine nuts and carrots and lemon, and it's one of my favorites.
Nice. Which one gave you the most trouble and which makes you the most proud?
It did give me the most trouble. There were a couple, and I am a stickler for this. So I had all of these recipes tested by other people, which means they make the recipe through and make sure that all the directions are right and they get the same result that I do. And I think what was troublesome? I don't know if anything was super troublesome. But this burger, my French bistro burger. So
Yum.
it made a lot. They're huge burgers. And a couple of people that tested it said, you really should make 6 burgers instead of 4 big ones. They're really big. But every time I made it, I was like, everyone likes this big bistro burger. So I left it at serves 4, but I put a note in there that you can make them smaller. So there was a lot of testing and back and forth with that one.
Nice. This is another one of my favorites.
Oh, the chicken and biscuit sandwich. Oh, I'm glad you love it.
Oh, man. First of all, I love a good biscuit. But then, I mean, you add chicken to it. So, yeah, I agree with Susie, who says the photographs are mouth-watering. Yes. Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Are there many tips in the book on plating? Lewis wants to know.
Yes, not a ton specifically, but definitely where there are moments, I put little notes at the bottom of the page, and they're called Looks Delicious. They're my Looks Delicious tips. And because I have such a background in food styling, I really did want to share, how can you make this look good? It's been roasting and cooking forever. How do you make it look good? I'll give you tips on creating beautiful snack boards, how to arrange things, or what to add to the top of the dish, or sprinkle on herbs on something very brown and it really brightens it. Sometimes I'll tell you to serve this individually or serve it family style because it might look better or different, but there are a few tips, not a ton.
Yeah, I like this one down at the bottom of the butterboard. That's so pretty.
So I'll tell you about that one while you flip to it. So if everyone, I don't know who has books at home that can see the picture, but we've all made a million cheese boards, right? And there's definitely an art to picking the variety of cheeses that we put on a cheese platter and serve to our guests or to our families. And as I was thinking, I love cheese boards, but I thought, I give tips for cheese boards and I've written about them for years on my blog. What can I do that's different? And I thought, I love just smearing butter on a crusty baguette and eating it. I could make a meal out of it. And so what I did was I created some flavored butters or compound butters and made those almost like my cheeses. And I serve a variety of flavored butters on a board so that you can just eat butter with your bread.
Whoops, wrong one. Do you recall your first time cooking on your own when you were younger?
A few memories, and they mostly revolve around the Easy Bake Oven. So I would cook with my mom when I was too small to even stand next to her. She'd put me up on the counter and let me help her cook. And I remember sitting on the counter. But my first experiences cooking by myself were in the Easy Bake Oven. And she really encouraged it. She was like, you make up your own recipes. When I ran out of their little pre-made mixes, she said, you go ahead and make your own recipes up. So those are my first memories.
Oh, that's fun. So Sue's got a question about food styling. I'm going to let you take that one.
Okay, it seems that cooking in magazines, many times the food is shown with a portion removed and remnants are on the plate. This is not visually pleasing to me, but it seems to be the trend. What do you think about it as a food stylist? Good eye to notice that there are trends. There are definitely trends in food styling, whether it's in cookbooks or magazines. And there is also a difference. So it sounds like your eye is, you are more appealed by advertorial food styling, where the food is more pristine, more put together. And you see that in advertising a lot. The trend the last many years has to be, we say it's more organic or natural. And so we do break food open and make it seem like you're sitting at the table with the food. I'm not one for the super messy. I don't want things to look really messy. I want you to look at that food and say, I want to make that. I want to eat it. And so this is one, that maybe you aren't super appealed by. My book was just open to it. It's a flatbread with steak and tomatoes and arugula, and I've broken into it. And what's funny is we took a picture of that flatbread whole, but I couldn't really give the experience of here's how you eat it, cut it into wedges, or I really wanted to make it feel like that was you cutting into it and devouring it. But there is a fine line to making food styling look messy or inviting. And so I applaud you for noticing that and finding a style that you like.
Now, if you had to suggest one knife for a small kitchen for someone to have, what would it be?
A small knife?
Yep. Or a knife for a small kitchen. So someone who doesn't have a ton of space. I do not have a ton of kitchen space.
Okay, and I don't either. I get you. I feel you, right? I live in a tiny apartment in New York City. So if we're talking about knives, the first one I always tell people to get is a chef's knife. Is that what you're talking about? My recommendation for that? So I would recommend a chef's knife, which is the basic, you chop, you slice, you dice. I even use the tip as almost like a paring knife because I'm so used to using a chef's knife in my hand. But if you can just afford one good knife, the thing is you can get really good knives now for a decent price. But I think a chef's knife. And there are two things I want to suggest, and it looks like we've got a mix, but a lot of women on tonight. And our hands are smaller. So you don't want to get an 8 or 10-inch chef's knife that's really big and heavy in your hand. So I really love a 6-inch chef's knife.
Okay.
Yeah, so I love that. Definitely go to the store, feel how the knives feel in your hand. Make sure you're getting a high quality knife so that it holds the edge when you sharpen it, and sharpen it often.
Ah. Oh, someone wants to know what your preferred brand of knife is.
Oh, good question. I actually have a few. Honestly, at the beginning of my career, I was using Henkel. They were readily accessible. And then I started using Wusthof because to me, they felt better in my hand. And so I have a mix of those, but I also have some global brand knives, and they're Asian based. So they have a different angle. The edge of that blade is a different angle. So European knives like Wusthof and Henkel are at 20 degree. And I think Japanese are like 22 or even smaller. So knives will be different. You can see how you like to sharpen them, how you like to use them. But those three I have the most of. I do have a few other brands, but those are my favorite. Oh, here's
not a question, but my wife and I think you were kind of robbed on the cookie challenge.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. For those of you that don't know, several years ago, I was on the Food Network Christmas Cookie Challenge, and I was a contestant. And let's see, I did not win. Cat's out of the bag. But I'll tell you what, I'm never doing a food competition again. And they keep playing reruns every Christmas. So every year I get, oh, I saw you on the Food Network. And I was like, oh, that was a few years ago. But I'll tell you, you know, years ago when I was an editor at magazines, I was asked to be a judge on a Food Network show. And so it was my first experience with that reality competition cooking TV. And I remember being a judge and thinking, oh, I would not want to be a contestant, because the producers really drum up drama and they want it to, you know, they want that action. And so years later, they reached out and asked me to be a contestant. And I said no. I said no 3 times, and they came back. And finally I thought, why not? Let me just go. I'll cook. I like to cook. It's Christmas cookies. But they make it stressful. So they want you to make these amazing creations. And you've heard it on the Great British Baking Show on the Food Network. They're like, you have 2 hours to make this giant 3-dimensional masterpiece out of food. And it really is hard. You're in a kitchen you don't know. Sometimes they don't have all the ingredients that you need. And it's, so I wasn't super proud of the creations I made, but I did it and it was fun. But thank you for that validation.
So just so you all know, I'm sharing another one of my favorites. I'm a huge avocado fan, like not a big avocado fan, but so not only is there spiced avocado mash in this recipe, there's also, is it pineapple, or there is a guacamole in the front of the book that uses fruit.
Yes, I use grapefruit. It's grapefruit.
It turned me into a guacamole fan.
Really?
So, yes. The rest of the family is happy because we buy avocados with a frequency now.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, cooking my way through the book.
I love it. So yes, if any of you have ever put fruit in your guacamole, it's seriously life-changing. The recipe in my book, I put pink grapefruit in my guacamole, and it just kind of brings out the flavor of that buttery, yummy avocado. And on my blog, I have a recipe for guacamole with grapes in it, and it's delicious. And I put pomegranates in my guacamole. Pineapple, you mentioned, that would be fantastic. I love that. I'm so glad you like it. And yes, that was my grilled steak, which is super simply seasoned with a steak rub. And I serve it instead of with, you know, when you go to a fancy steak restaurant, they put a big pat of herb butter on top. I put a big dollop of avocado cream, and it's just, to me, so delicious.
I agree. It was delicious. One of the other, so once again, bragging some more about your book here.
Thanks.
One of the other things I love about this book is I love the way it reads. So if you do not have this book, as soon as I turn it into the library again and get my own, it'll be back. But it reads fantastically. You feel like Tara's talking to you. So
Thank you.
Yes, once again, big fan. All right.
Thanks so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
If anyone has any other questions, I'd love to chat more. Does anyone have recipes that they've gotten from cookbooks that they love, that have become family favorites that they want to share with us? Tell us. I just love when you find something and it turns into a regular routine or something that you pass on to the next generation. I just find that so wonderful. Nobody's saying anything yet, just kind of listening.
What's your favorite dessert to make?
From the book or in general?
From the book.
From the book. It depends on who I'm serving. I mean, if it's just me and I'm going to eat it, it's the chocolate chip cookies. I am such a huge chocolate chip cookie fan. It's so pedestrian, but I love it. It's just comfort food. But one of the other ones that I love serving to people is this vanilla pound cake with vanilla pudding and cream. So the pound cake is just your basic, like, perfect bundt pound cake recipe. And then growing up, my mom would make cake mix. and serve warm pudding and whipped cream on top. And that was a favorite dessert when I was a child. And so this recipe just elevates that. So I've made a homemade pound cake and a homemade vanilla pudding. And then you put cold whipped cream on the top, and it's just so amazing and everybody loves it. So that's one of them. I definitely have more fancy desserts in here and different fun ones. I've got a strawberry cream cheese ice cream with ginger snaps in it.
Yum.
And if you are a fan of making homemade ice cream, I definitely recommend that one. It's one of my faves in the book. And then the one that I make the most for people, I think, because I don't know, they just haven't had anything like it, are these soft ginger snaps filled with an orange cream cheese filling. And especially now with Christmas baking, it's one of my favorites to share and bake for people.
So Sue says, I found an octopus stew recipe in a Mediterranean cookbook.
Oh.
So Sue, I have to ask, do you make it?
That is awesome. Isn't that fun? And you're just like, I want to make that. I'm sharing it.
And then Rachel says, there is an amazing Pampered Chef salmon recipe with an orzo pasta that's steamed in paper that I love to serve to company.
Oh, fantastic. So it's en papillote. It's in paper. That is awesome. That is the way I cook most of my fish, is steamed in paper. Not only does it not smell the house up as much, but it perfectly cooks that fish. It never dries it out. Oh, that's so great.
Nice.
She does. She makes the octopus.
She does. Is that I just have to ask again, is that an all day event, or is it so I'm not a seafood fan. So octopus is new. That would be new. Does it take long to cook? I don't know. I don't know anything about octopus.
I think every recipe is a little bit different, but I think it is sometimes a quick cooking
Interesting
thing, but she'll have to tell us. She says it's a stew, so maybe it cooks for a long time.
That's interesting.
I love it. I love it.
What's your favorite comfort food?
It depends on the season. I think in the winter it's meat and potatoes. It's some sort of slow cooked roast or short ribs or meat or roast chicken with just vegetable side dishes, whatever's in season, squash, beans, things like that. So I love slow cooked meats in the wintertime. And then in the summer, I think it's grilling to me. I think that is just so satisfying, is whether it's grilled vegetables or grilled chicken or just something on the grill it seems fresher, right? Because it's summer and you're cooking outside. But those are probably two. But I will say, I'm going to bring up chocolate chip cookies again. You give me a warm chocolate chip cookie and that is comfort for me.
Nice. I wonder what our participants' favorite comfort foods are. That would be nice to know. Especially
I would love to know. There's always the typical ones like mac and cheese and, ribs, and Southern sort of food is often comfort food. And that's one of the reasons I put a mac and cheese in the book, but I didn't want it to just be plain. And I put a lasagna in the book. I think that's like comfort family food. And then
lasagna.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think also breakfasts to me can be comfort food.
Yes. Agreed.
Pancakes, and I've got some really delicious hash browns with black beans and salsa. And it's funny, I think comfort foods are regional. To me, I grew up eating a lot of Mexican food and Southwest flavors. And so tacos and salsa and things like that, yes, are comfort foods for me. And Sue said that the octopus takes a long time to clean, but then it simmers in red wine and tomatoes and onion and garlic. That's awesome.
Go to town.
So yeah, nobody's piped in with comfort foods just yet. How about you, Erica? What's yours?
There's so many, truly. So I love cooking, love to cook at home. I think one of my favorites is chicken noodle soup.
Yes.
Eat that a lot. You cannot go wrong with chicken noodle soup or grilled cheese and tomato soup.
Yes. Yes. Yep. I love all of those. Oh, that's awesome.
Yep. Grilled cheese and tomato soup is probably on the menu tonight.
Oh, I'll bet it's chill. Is it chilly where you are?
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. When the sun goes down, for sure.
That's perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Great. If anyone has any other questions for me, I'm happy to chat. I'm also, what's that? Oh. Good question. Of the recipes that didn't make the book, were they just not good enough or too personal to share? Good question. I don't know that I've ever had a recipe too personal to share, although I do have a story about that in a minute. There were a few recipes that didn't make the book because once I narrowed down the chapters of the book, they didn't fit into the chapters. And I really wanted this book to be something that you read. You went through the book and it flowed and it took you through a meal and a journey. And so some of those recipes had to come out. But I'll tell you a secret, a little teaser. I signed another book contract. So in a few years, you'll see another one. So yeah, I think it will be structured differently so I can share some different types of recipes that didn't make this book. And then there was one recipe I will tell you because I can't remember who it was, asked about food styling, Sue. There was I can just tell you what it is. I have the recipe and it's delicious. It was a dulce de leche coconut cinnamon roll. No cinnamon, but it was like a sweet bun with coconut and dulce de leche in the middle and then drizzled with frosting. And it's divine. But on the photo shoot, we couldn't get it to look just right. You know, I had this big pan of buns and they're so good, but they didn't look right to me. Like it looked too messy or they were too big, or I feel like I needed to make them a different size to make them look appealing. So it got cut. And then I have a funny story. So for me, my life is sharing recipes. I don't hold back secret recipes or anything like that. But growing up, one of our neighbors, Jolene, awesome woman, one of our best friends when I was young and growing up, her mother had a chocolate cake recipe with an amazing frosting. And my mother was always asking her for that recipe, and Jolene would not give it to her for years. And then one day, Jolene agreed to give her the recipe. So she brought over the piece of paper with the recipe on it. And my mom looked at it and she said, "This is just the cake recipe. Where's the frosting recipe?" And Jolene said, "You don't get that." And my mom said, "The frosting makes the cake." So I just think it's so funny when people hold back recipes, because for me, share it. Everyone makes things slightly different anyway. And I'm like, if it brings you joy, make it.
I like that. Does the family have a favorite recipe out of the cookbook?
Yes, thanks for asking. They actually have a few. And when I'm in New York, you know, I'm not by my family. And it's so fun to come home. I'm spending the holidays with my family, and they really do have favorites. I cannot tell you how many times we have made the chicken pozole soup. Here, let's see if I can find the picture. I finally told them, I'm done. We've had enough of this. But they love it so much. And so that's one. The Thai peanut curry is another one. My brother and sister-in-law in particular, we have to double the batch because they will eat a batch by themselves. So there are a few. And then I'll tell you what's kind of exciting. We usually have the same Christmas dinner as a family every year. We do a prime rib and side dishes, and it's kind of classic Christmas. And this year we're like, 2020 was different. Let's do a different Christmas dinner. And we're going to make the lasagna out of my cookbook for Christmas dinner.
That's nice. That sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
That does sound good. Hmm.
So I get asked this a lot lately about entertaining, but I'm wondering of the crowd here, if they want to share, how has cooking changed for you this year? And are you cooking more at home? Are you burnt out? What's going on in your homes? How about you, Erica?
Oh, definitely cooking a lot more at home for sure. Oh, yes. Yep.
And so cookbooks are kind of a nice resource, right? To kind of get yourself out of the rut. I even get in ruts.
Well, and it's nice because I love to, I don't know about everybody else, but I love to take a cookbook home and I read the whole thing. I read a cookbook just like I would read a work of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's how I like to spend my evening. So it's really, which is another reason why I love this so much because
Thank you.
it was easy to read. I love that. Sometimes you get the occasional cookbook that's just not so easy to read.
Yeah.
So
Well, thanks for saying that. I had a little battle with my editor about that because I really did want to tell the story of the recipe, on the different pages, and I wanted to to have somebody be able to read the book and feel like they were talking to me. And when I turned in my manuscript, it got edited to smithereens, and they took out a lot of those stories. And so I battled it out and said, I want those in there. It's important to me to share the background of the recipes, why I added certain ingredients, how this, where it came from, that sort of thing. So I got all of that in, and I'm glad you liked reading it.
I did. Rachel wants to know, she said, I use allrecipes.com for a lot of my recipes. It's a pet peeve of mine when people give a recipe a high rating, but then list a million things they changed. What are your thoughts on that?
So
Yeah,
okay,
that's a good question.
yeah, let me see if I understand that, because I feel you. Are you talking about the other people in the recipe commenting, right? And they're like, I changed this, and this, and I give it a 5-star, right? Yes. So I love scanning the internet for recipes. My business is online. I share recipes online. So I know what you mean. I'm online looking through recipes for inspiration, seeing what trends are. I don't use all recipes very often because they are user generated recipes and they're not often tested. So I think you are wise in reading those comments to see if it's a good recipe. Why take the time to read, Muriel's recipe if it hasn't been tested and it's not tried and true. So you really do rely on those comments. And I agree, it's my pet peeve too, in two ways. So I love seeing how people cook on their own and say, hey, I looked at this recipe and I know I want to switch this and I want to add this. And then I made it my own and I loved it, but it doesn't tell me anything about that original recipe, right? So I think that's very hard. And I love finding websites where the recipe is solid enough that there's enough comments saying, I made this exactly and it's awesome. But I will say on my own website, I get questions like that and they'll say, hey, I changed this and I added this and I cooked it for less time and it didn't turn out. What did I do wrong? And I'm like, well, you didn't make my recipe for one thing, but I do encourage people to go off on their own. But it is hard. The internet is so big, so vast, full of so many options. And I think if you can find a few reputable websites, some of them that I love, Cooks Illustrated is paid for, but those recipes are solid. And then most magazine websites, like Epicurious is a conglomerate of a lot of different magazines. They're tested. There's a test kitchen behind those recipes, real simple. So Better Homes and Gardens, all of those recipes will have been tested by professionals. And so I encourage you to find some websites like terrateaspoon.com that you like.
Nice.
Oh, good question. So aside from Live Life Deliciously, what's your go-to cookbook? Like I said, I love cookbooks so much. I don't often cook from them. I will use them as inspiration and then sort of make my own thing. Sometimes I don't even read the recipe. I will look at the pictures and then make my own recipe up. I guess I'll answer it in a slightly different way. One of the cookbooks that I've most recently bought for myself, and I love looking through and I'm very inspired by, is by Tegan Gerard. She's a young blogger, and she's self-taught with cooking, and her blog is Half Baked Harvest. And so her cookbook is the same name, Half Baked Harvest. Erica, maybe you've seen it come through your shelves. But I'm inspired by her. I really like flipping through that book. And then one of my mentors, Susan Spungen, who actually wrote an endorsement on the back of my book. She was the founding food editor of Martha Stewart magazine. And I most recently bought her book. She had a book come out in the spring of this year. And same thing. I haven't made anything from her book, but I have picked it up many times and I've dog-eared pages because I think, oh, I want to do that when I've got the time to sit down and make something new. So I really have enjoyed those two books lately.
That was a good question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's certainly old ones. I love anything by Rick Bayless. I always find myself going to him to find, like a great seasoning or rub or sauce. I've got, and Jamie Oliver. I love any book by Jamie Oliver, and I love his shows. I feel like his personality comes into his food, and it's just, he makes cooking fun for me.
Nice. One of the other things I like about your book is you don't use one ingredient for one recipe. You use that same ingredient in other recipes too. So if it's a new ingredient to you, you don't feel like you're losing out on anything because you went to buy it for one recipe. You use it again in others. And that's so refreshing. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think it plays into my philosophy of that new pantry, the new pantry staples, something that looks different than our pantry even 10 years ago. I think we buy new spices, we try new sauces and condiments and things, ingredients, and then sometimes we don't use them again. But I really thought, hey, if you're buying these new spices, these new flavors, I want to show you how to incorporate them into multiple meals. So I did that.
Thank you.
Another question, let's see. Yeah.
Rachel wants to know, whose opinion do you, oh, my screen keeps going out. There it is. Whose opinion do you value most when it comes to your recipes? Your family, editors, or others?
Oh, good question. I don't know that I've ever articulated this. My family, definitely, they weigh in, and I do respect their opinion, but I don't always take their opinion. My friends in New York City, I think I must value their opinion more than my family, because I think my family's pretty pleased with anything, but my friends in New York might be a little more food snobbish, and so they can explain, well, I like this about this, or what if you changed this? So I think I rely on coworkers and friends in New York more.
Where do you find more inspiration, in your kitchen in Utah or the kitchen in New York?
I think New York. I think New York because I can wander into New York grocery stores or go to an Asian market in New York, and the world is at my fingertips. And I think I get inspired. It's a different feel to live there, to cook there, to eat there at the different restaurants. And so I think I'm probably most inspired when I'm there. When I'm home in Utah, we don't go out to eat a lot. We cook in, especially this year. The restaurants are not as varied as other big cities. And so we tend to make our own, meals. And I do explore and I do try new things because I've got a hungry audience with my family here. but I think I do most of my creativity and creative work in New York.
Nice. Does anyone in the group have any other questions for Miss Tara here?
Where do I find my really old cookbooks?
Good question.
I have been collecting cookbooks for 25 years, since I really started being interested in food. And most of my first ones were antique stores. That corner of an antique store where they have a stack of books. When I moved to New York City, I would go to old bookstores, not as many antique stores. I would go to old bookstores and look specifically for things. Like I wanted the set of Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And so I searched for that at old bookstores for a while. And of course, when I walk in, I find other books that I'm like, ooh, I love that. So I just would collect them over the years that way. I was at Ladies Home Journal when they shut the magazine down. And I had managed the library that they had for many years. And they had collected many cookbooks. So I did take a few of those old cookbooks. They were just going to get rid of them. And so I found some real treasures there. But it really has been, I've been gifted a lot of my vintage cookbooks as well. But it's just for me, if I wander into a new town or a new antique store, just kind of browsing there.
Nice.
Thanks, Sue.
What a treasure trove of cookbook material to gather from Ladies Home Journal.
Yes, it was. It was.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Let's see. I have, Erica, do you mind if I put a link in?
Please.
Let's see if I can pull it. I have a lot of screens going on here, so I'll see if I can get to it. Just Sue mentioned she's excited to get the book, and I would love to. I have a few copies here that I am personally selling because I have not been able to go on a book tour this year. My book tour had to turn virtual. And so in order to get people signed books, I have had to sign them myself and ship them out to you. So let me put a link in where you can get a signed copy of the book right from me. And if anybody would like to do that, I will also put a coupon code in there. Oh, Google, there it is. All right. I do love Zoom for this reason. There's so many ways to share our information. And
there it is.
So this coupon code, if you order from that exact link, you get 20% off. And I ship at media rates, so it's a little cheaper for you, but it takes a while. So it takes at least 10 days. So if you want it for Christmas, order now. But for joining me tonight and sharing this lovely evening, I want to offer you that code. And if you want a signed copy.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Tara, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. We've got it. Tara's got the link. I will send the link in an email as well. I see you, Doris.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone, for your questions. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
Please send the link in an email. Erica, I'll send you that link and you can send it out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So everybody will get it. Thank you, guys.
Yay.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
Yep. Good night. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Good night, everybody.